Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Beware the Board, a horror podcast where we watch a randomly selected horror movie every single week. I'm Bob.
I'm Ben.
Hey, Ben.
What's up?
Nothing much.
All right.
What about you? Ain't
I
cool.
don't have anything.
Nothing?
I got a piece of news.
Oh, what do you got?
Because
Hell yeah.
I saw it on the interwebs, but you might actually have written it down in your notes.
That'd be crazy if you stole my news, but I won't be mad about it.
So, I get on my phone, I have a Google Pixel.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I get like news stuff that's curated
Yeah.
on like a side dashboard thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if other Android phones do that, but it's curated based on what you like click on. So I click on a bunch of articles from like horror stuff, so that tends to be what I get.
Sure.
And one of the articles showed me like a new film, so I thought I'd mention it here. Caitlin Cronenberg.
Oh, I didn't write this down, but I know what you're talking about.
So the daughter of, the Cronenberg is making a new film. It's called Humane.
Yeah.
And basically the premise is, I guess it's an eco like horror thriller. But basically, the world has reached peak saturation of humans, and climate change has gotten especially bad. And the kind of post-apocalyptic solution is that I think it's like 20% of the population needs to die.
Yeah.
But it's by volunteer basis.
Mm-hmm.
And in this family, assumedly the two parents volunteer, or at least the dad and his wife or partner. And when the people show up to, like, put the two down, the woman's run off. So the dad gets put down, but the guy who's there to pick up bodies is like, I have to pick up two bodies.
Oh,
so you
God.
have, like, I don't know, until I leave. So probably, like, 10, 12 hours? It didn't say in the trailer. But you have until I, like, leave to give me another body. So choose.
Holy shit. No, I saw this one, and I didn't write it down because I was waiting on more stuff to come out before I wrote some stuff down about it. I usually wait for, like...
It looks like it's coming out
closer to
on
release.
Shudder.
Yeah. Looks cool.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cool stuff coming out soon. Speaking of stuff coming out soon, this actually brings me into my next piece of news, if we're already on to that thing. Okay, so we're going to talk about Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey again.
Ugh.
I'm sorry. I know you hate it,
Is
but
this
this
about the sequel?
This is more than the sequel, Benjamin. This is far greater.
Far worse, you mean?
So, it is getting a sequel called Winnie the Pooh.
Why are you
Blood and Honey
having
2.
trouble with Winnie the Pooh?
I don't know, bro. Okay, calm down. There are also a couple of other films in the same universe being created. Most notably, Bambi: The Reckoning,
Yeah,
Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare,
yeah.
Pinocchio Unstrung. Those are all films in the same universe, in the same vein of like taking childhood things and making them scary. They're a part of what ITN Studios and Jagged Edge Productions have called the Twisted Childhood Universe. So this has a name now, otherwise known as the TCU. Okay. Now, how are all these films tied together? They're in this universe, but they've not done like anything crazy with it, right? In 2025, it has been announced there will be an Avengers-style crossover between all of these films called Poohverse Monsters Assemble, where they all join forces to hunt down their victims. Is essentially their version of the MCU with all the villains coming together to murder people. The cool thing is, though, it's not only bringing characters from their individual films with them and like bringing them into the same place, but introducing new ones as well. So there'll be new characters that we'll get to see that are only specific to this film. And if that wasn't enough violence and bloodshed for you, apparently the monsters will not always get along, and we will get to see some monster-on-monster violence on top of all of that. Now, I have not seen Winnie the Pooh, I can't say it. Winnie the Pooh,
There
Blood
you go.
and Honey. I've heard it's not great. But, this seems fun.
Look, I think that's a fun idea, but you haven't seen Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey.
I've not.
It is very cheap, but very cheap in a frustrating way. I think the biggest offender for that is the simple fact that I don't know if I've told you this story, but they got masks for the characters.
Mm-hmm.
There's only, I think, two of the characters in it. There's Pooh and Piglet.
Yeah, those are the two I know
But
about.
they were very specifically just generic masks you could buy on the internet and not like Winnie the Pooh or Piglet masks.
I see.
And, stuff like that really makes the film feel, I think, underwhelming for what you'd want for like a, I don't know, an ode to Winnie the Pooh. Maybe a corrupt ode to Winnie the Pooh. But it made the film feel very underwhelming and very much of like a cash grab, but not in a way you'd want for something like that.
I guess that's fair.
And my concern for any of the other films I know from that director is that it's going to be kind of that similar vein.
Yeah, I know he's
of
directing
stuff.
the crossover film, but I don't know if he's directing all the individual films that make that up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know either. I'd guess probably.
Probably.
And I mean, his style is like making low budget stuff. But yeah, my concern is they're just not going to be great movies, which is fine, but they're not going to be great movies that don't give me the, I don't know, the kind of schlock I want.
They're bad in a bad way, not bad in a good way is what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Which sucks. And the only reason I brought this news up is because, A, I think it's one of the first times I've heard of something being done like this in a horror like franchise, or like, not franchise, but like horror movies in general. I've not heard of anything else like this doing, except for maybe
Freddy vs. Jason.
Well, this is more than that, right? It's like multiple movies stringing to. It's it's the first time I've seen something MCU like in horror, so I think that's kind of cool.
I guess, although you can get into debate about that being overdone too.
I mean, that's fair. No, I totally understand that as well.
Also, I don't know if you've heard, that director has made some comments.
Oh, I have no idea.
Nothing like offensive, but he was like getting on people for jumping on like this is in the public domain. You guys shouldn't like make cash grabs because it'll destroy the art form.
Bro, what?
Because he was getting on the people making all like the Mickey Mouse stuff. And he was like, if you guys keep doing that, it's going to lessen some of the other works that come out. And it felt very disingenuous because he was like the first person on that train.
Yeah. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey was one of the first films I heard about doing something like this.
I don't know. You can look
like
it
that,
up.
I mean.
I don't remember the exact quote, but I read it and I was like, that's very gatekeeping of this thing where you made a lot of money and you're like, I don't want anyone else to do it.
That's exactly how it feels. It's like, yeah, this is my thing. Stop stepping on my territory. But anyone can make a movie like that.
It's the movie video game adaptation from the early 2000s of horror movies.
Okay.
It's our video game tie-in.
Oh, God. No. In other news, something that is not going to come out for a while, but I'm mildly excited about, David Chase, mostly known for creating one of the greatest, if not the greatest TV shows of all time, The Sopranos, has been contracted by New Line Cinema with the help of Sopranos producer Terrence Winter to direct a horror movie. That's about all I know about this one so far. There are no other details about this project at the moment. They just have said they're contracted by New Line to make a horror movie. I think that's super cool.
Do you think it's going to be really Italian?
I would love that. That's so cool. I've heard from so many people that The Sopranos is like...
Bob's like, it's a great TV show. Haven't seen it.
That's it right there. I've heard it's amazing. And tons of my friends have sat down and watched the whole thing and gone, it's incredible. You should watch it. And I go, I don't want to do that.
Really Italian. There's just going to be a mom that's really disappointed in her son. Because he's not as good as his brother.
Oh, my God. Is that the plot of The Sopranos? I have no idea.
I think that was just a stereotype, Bob.
Oh, okay. Anyway, I thought that was cool. I think that's pretty exciting when you have people that have made other types of content coming into horror and making stuff, because it will generally probably be good. Because, I mean, The Sopranos is critically acclaimed. People love that show. So,
I mean, hopefully. I mean, skills don't always translate over into different genres. I mean, like, your general skills do, but, there's different parameters.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of what makes The Sopranos great, according to what people have said, is, like, the actual writing and the plot and stuff like that. So, something like that being brought over to a horror film is exciting.
I mean, hopefully,
rather than it just being like a bloodbath that's fun.
But we don't know anything about the project.
Really, no, I don't know shit. I'm just telling you this is what's happening. So that's pretty cool. Last thing, this is not so much. Well, I guess it is kind of news, but it's just something cool that I read on the internet, so I'm going to talk about it. Everyone loves zombie movies. They're like a horror staple at this point. Everyone knows about zombies. They're really culturally relevant, I guess.
Yeah, although you could argue that people have been over-zombied.
People have. You're right. Which is kind of the point of this thing I'm about to say. If you're in the camp, like Ben just said, where you're being over-zombied, there's too much zombie content out there for you. I mean, there's
The Walking Dead's been on for like 10 years now.
The Walking Dead, I think, is over now.
Yeah, but they're doing spin-offs.
But there's all the Walking Dead spin-off shows and all that stuff and like blah, 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 blah.
Can I take it aside and say what my big issue with that is?
Oh, my God. Is it that it's not? Never mind. You go.
What were you going to say?
Nothing. Keep going.
Oh, my big issue with that is, besides the fact that, like, those guys would not survive that long in that situation.
Okay, not where I thought you were going with this.
But my real issue is I think The Walking Dead did a lot of really cool things with certain aspects of realism in that situation. Obviously, they bent the rules here and there to make a more interesting show.
Mm-hmm.
I think a good example of that is there's a whole thing where they're like, if we cover ourselves in walker like guts and stuff,
Yeah, they won't
it's
attack
camouflage.
us. Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of cool.
Which is really cool, and I think that makes a lot of sense, but they obviously skip past the logistical factor of, if we get any of this zombie guts like in our eyes or in our ears or something like that, we'll be infected.
Mm-hmm.
But so like they bend the rules for like rule of cool stuff, which I think is acceptable. But there's a couple like issues that I have problems with where they did something really cool and very realistic, but because the show went on for so long, it got kind of unfortunate. Right off the top, one of the little things is they have a couple characters that use specifically like quiet weapons.
Oh, yeah.
Which is great, but then there's a bunch of characters that don't, like guns.
Mm-hmm.
You know what happens if you use a lot of guns? You get hearing damage,
Mm.
which is really bad if you're being stalked by a bunch of stuff. That's a small one. But my big one is, I think it's a really cool thing they do in that series, is over time, the zombies get more and more rotten.
Yeah.
They go into, like, black rot and stuff.
We talked about that before, I think.
Yeah, but the length of which the show goes on wouldn't work, because all the zombies should have rotted away.
Mm.
Because bodies rot really quickly, especially where it's really warm, like where the show's set.
Yeah.
So it's like, wow, you did a good job showing rot, but like, we should be done by now.
Okay. Not where I thought you were going. I thought you were going to bitch about how it's different from the comics, which is a lot of
No, I don't
people
care.
have. A lot of people,
I don't read the comics.
A lot of people.
I don't watch the
comics.
TV show.
I have not watched the TV show in a long time.
I watched some of the early episodes, and I was laughing the whole time, and then I stopped.
Okay. Anyway, back to this zombie thing I was talking about. There's a new zombie film coming to Screenbox called Exit Humanity. This is not a new film. It's just a film that is now being added to it. What's cool about this movie is it's not a modern zombie film or anything like that. It's actually set just after the end of the American Civil War, which I think is a super sick period to set something like this. Because, like, guns weren't like, we had guns, right? But they weren't as advanced as they are now, so there's a lot less protection from zombies and things like that. But the other cool thing is it blends live action, like, actual film with animated sequences to create a sort of deeper message behind a lot of stuff, and I think that's super sick. I actually looked at the trailer. It looks really cool. Also, Bill Moseley from House of Thousand Corpses is in it, and Dee Wallace from Cujo.
That's cool.
So there's some horror icons.
We just saw Dee Wallace.
Am I where?
Creep Show.
Really? I did not remember that. Oh, yeah. Holy shit. I forgot about that. It's only been a week.
Yeah, it's only been a week, and I mean, I think I mentioned her on the episode,
Mhm.
right?
You did. That's why I remembered just now when I said Cujo out loud.
Who is she in that?
You were the one pulling up your notes, homie.
No, I wasn't pulling up my notes, but I guess that would make sense.
That's what I thought you were doing.
Nah, I pulled up Google because I was like, Google will tell me because my actual list is insane.
That's true. We have over 100 episodes of the podcast now, so it's probably pretty dense.
No, my notes are organized. I meant like the list of characters
In Creepshow.
Yeah. No, wait. I don't think she was in Creepshow. She was in The Hills Have Eyes.
Oh.
That's what she was in.
Oh, it's not. Oh, yeah, you're right. It's been 2 weeks since we
Because she was
recorded
Lynn
that episode.
Wood.
That's who she was.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's why I was like, I couldn't find her in Creepshow. That's why.
Because she was in The Hills Have Eyes. I don't know why. Why did I forget that we
Because that's the
recorded that
most
last
recent
week?
film we watched.
Yeah. Anyway, I thought that was just a cool little talk about a cool, interesting-looking zombie film with some cool horror actors in it that I would mention on the podcast. Moving on to the podcast part of the podcast, where we watch a movie and talk about it. What am I picking, Ben?
I mean, I can't tell you, but you've chosen one from every category
No, I know.
except cannibals, where you've chosen 2. So I assume you're going to wait on cannibals.
Honestly, I could do it. I could power through another one right now and get it over with. Considering we watched The Hills Have Eyes and I survived and I actually really liked that film and I think it's super cool, but I won't because I'm scared. Because I'm really scared of the last film in that category because I don't know what it is and I don't want to throw up today. And I really don't want to pick my category, not because like I didn't like Creepshow.
It's because the movies are long.
It's because the movies are long.
Yeah.
And I really am tired today. I don't want to sit through a 2.5-hour movie about some theme that Romero made. Even though I really enjoy them and I think they're super good usually, but meh. So I'm going to pick found footage films.
Sweet.
Early found footage films. I'm sorry. I should be more specific in my category choosing. I don't know what I chose last time. What do I got?
I believe you chose 3.
Okay. I'm going to say this right now, Ben. If you hit me with another found footage alien abduction film in the same category, I'll lose my shit.
No, there was just one.
Uh-huh.
Just one alien abduction film.
What's in spot number 1 in early found footage, Ben?
Spot number 1 is a film from 1992
Oh, holy shit.
called Ghostwatch.
Ghost film? Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
These are also very scary to me. I don't like ghosts. Well, I don't say that. I don't not like ghosts. I don't want to mess with ghosts because if ghosts are real, which I think they are, there's no reason to antagonize them. We've been over this on the podcast, right?
Assumedly.
At some point. It's 160 episodes or some bullshit now at this point. It's not that many, but it's a lot. Yeah. Anyway, Ghostwatch. What's this film about, Ben?
Description. It's time to investigate a haunting.
Let's go! Another one. I like these kinds of films. I think they're fun.
It's an hour and 31 minutes. It's not rated. IMDb gave it a 7.4 out of 10.
That's pretty good.
Tomato meter gave it 100%.
Holy shit!
An audience score of 76%.
Why didn't we watch this with Austin instead of Grave Encounters?
Because I wanted to save it.
This film seems like it's so much better than that one.
Well, I knew Austin would like Grave Encounters.
That's true, and he did. So,
this is also a weird film where it just got added to Shudder.
dude, Shudder just keeps saving you money.
Oh, I already owned this film. I had to purchase it. Because before it got added to Shudder, like you could only get it, I think, on YouTube.
Holy
to purchase.
shit! Really?
So it's more available than it used to be. I think before I get into actors, I should maybe introduce what the concept actually is for a second. Because, the whole premise of this category is it's found footage before found footage was kind of known
Yeah.
as a concept. What this is it was a made-for-TV like movie, essentially.
Okay.
Wasn't a movie, though. It was a segment on the BBC where the BBC essentially did a spoof of a ghost investigation.
That's awesome. Holy shit.
So I mention that now before I do actors because the film had a number of real-life BBC reporters on the show.
That's sick.
So, Michael Parkinson as himself. He was Parky in Love Actually. Sarah Green as herself. She was a TV presenter in The Man Who Knew Too Little. Mike Smith as himself. He was also a TV presenter in The Man Who Knew Too Little. And Craig Charles as himself. And I think for a lot of nerds, Craig Charles is the most famous out of those 4 people because he played Craig Charles, Lister, Rimmer, and Spanner from Red Dwarf.
Oh.
He was on 74 episodes from 1988 to 2020. I think he's one of only 2 actors that's been in like every episode of Red Dwarf.
That's cool.
I don't know if you know this, is a popular TV show.
I've heard it's okay.
Gillian Bevan as Dr. Lynn Pascoe. She was Claire from Teachers. She was on 39 episodes between 2001 and 2004. Brid Brennan as Pamela Early. She was Agnes Mundy in Dancing at Lugnasa. I definitely didn't pronounce that right. It's Irish. Michelle Wesson as Suzanne Early. She was Mandy Hopkirk from Inspector Morse. She was on 1 episode in 1990. And then Charis Wesson as Kim Early, and she wasn't on anything else. Director's Leslie Manning. She also directed The Agent, and the writer was Stephen Volk. He wrote The Awakening. Don't know the budget. Obviously, there was no box office because it was a made-for-TV special.
Mm-hmm.
Country of origin, United Kingdom.
Yep.
If you couldn't get the BBC thing.
Yep. That's why I was going to ask, but then I realized you were going to tell me.
And then the tagline, which is only on some of like the DVD releases for this, is "We don't want to give anybody sleepless nights."
That's not. I actually kind of like that one.
And I skipped this, but there's no awards or nominations.
Mm-hmm.
So I think before I get into anything else, I should note that this story is based on the tale of the Enfield poltergeist.
I don't know that one.
Well, then this will be new. I think it's a British one.
Mm.
So it was, how do I put this? Like I said, it's supposed to be a spoof of like investigative journalism, but specifically focused on, hey, let's look into a haunting and see if it's real. The film feels like a fairly serious news broadcast segment.
That's cool.
And what I'm going to mention right now before we get into the film is, once again, there was another kind of case of this being a very effective hoax.
That's awesome.
In fact, I will say this is up there as one of the most effective like TV show hoaxes of all time. It's especially in Britain, which is kind of unfortunate that this didn't have the same impact in the States as it did in England, because obviously it wasn't really showing here. But from my understanding, there was a disclaimer at the beginning that was like, hey, this isn't real. But that was the only disclaimer for the show.
Mm-hmm.
But this was back in, 92?
Yeah.
So before people had things like, the ability to rewind or pause. So if you missed that segment that was like, hey, this isn't real, you didn't get a disclaimer. And so there was a bunch of people who got really, really freaked out by this. A bunch of children also watched it.
Oh, my God.
So there was a bunch of scared kids, and, it wasn't great. And I'll talk more about that stuff at the end, but I thought I should mention right now that, like, it was fairly effective.
That's awesome. Why both of these? Is there like a theme? Is that going to be all three of the movies in this category?
Not all three of them, but it is kind of a theme, because you have to remember people weren't really trained to realize that, like, I can look at this piece and my media literacy is thorough enough that I can go, okay, this is fake.
Yeah.
It really wasn't until Blair Witch and then Paranormal Activity that people really got a handle of the found footage genre. So anything that you see that's like found footage that comes out before those two films tricked people generally.
That's so cool. That's such an interesting thing of, like, culturally that was normal, like that just happened, and now we're past the point where that can happen. And I'm kind of sad about that.
It's not necessarily like culturally that things could happen. It's more that, I mean, I don't know if you've heard about it, but the Blair Witch Project tricked a bunch of people.
Yeah, no, it did.
A lot. And I think it's one of those things where once you get tricked once, it's a lot easier to be like, oh, this is real. Or this is like a
fake.
real movie, so it's fake. Not to mention that, like, once people started realizing, like, this is a thing we can do, and films like that become more common. It's oversaturation.
No, I guess my point is, like, that's so cool.
Oh, it's so
and
cool.
I'm so sad that it can't
like,
really
all these
happen
stories
anymore.
are so cool, but it's, it's not something that you're really going to see too much of anymore. I think there's still some found footage films that really push the genre that can do stuff.
Yeah.
I vaguely mentioned this movie before in the past, and I'm not going to give you the name of it, because at some point we'll watch it. But I watched this movie a couple months ago because I heard about it, and it was a found footage film. And the director, he basically researched a bunch of found footage films to see what was effective.
Mm-hmm.
And he used some of the stuff he learned to pull off some fairly impressive hoax stuff.
Oh, that's pretty sick.
So, like, you can still pull stuff off. It's just a lot harder, and the effects aren't going to be as, like, big.
Yeah. Okay.
That being said, are you ready to watch it?
Yeah, I guess.
All right, well, we'll be back in a minute.
Yeah, we'll be back in a minute. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We just finished watching Ghostwatch.
Yeah. What do you think, Bob? You seem a little bit weird right now.
Ben, that might be the scariest movie I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, really?
Oh, my God.
I was concerned you were bored. No,
No.
Are you Did that actually freak you out?
That movie's scary, Ben.
You look like you're about to cry.
Yeah, man.
Oh.
That movie's really scary.
I wasn't picking up on that reaction at all. It might be because you got really quiet at the end.
Yeah. Fuck, bro. Like, look, I was excited about that film, and it was really good, but like I was not scream for my life scared. I was terrified with silence scared. If that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't screaming. There was no I'm
No, you were very quiet.
chilled to my bone.
Oh. Well, that's a better reaction than I was expecting.
Really?
Yeah.
You thought
I wasn't expecting the tears, Bob.
I'm not crying. I'm not crying.
You are watering up. I can see it from across the table.
It's also my allergies.
I mean that too.
That helps. But also that movie's really scary. Like I did not expect to get that scared at this film going in. But holy shit.
You liked it?
Yeah, it's a good movie.
Okay. Well, I guess we can get into a bit of the description here. As always, I'd recommend you go watch it blind.
Going in blind with this movie's crazy.
It's definitely worth a blind watch. But I'm gonna give a brief description, and then we'll do actual spoilers. But the premise of this film, like I said, is they're doing a live news broadcast called Ghostwatch. It's like a special Halloween program because this did come out Halloween night, 1992. And the premise is they're going to, what is it, like Fox Trot, something like that?
Nope, Fox Hill.
Fox Hill.
Fox Hill Drive, specifically.
Anyways, they're going to like this house in Fox Hill Drive. I say house. It's like a condo, it looks like, or a townhouse. Anyways, it's haunted. And half the show is in the newsroom where they've got like the presenter and he's sitting with like a psychic. I say psychic, like a paranormal researcher.
Investigator, scientist lady.
Who's been working at the property. And then there's like a booth where they're doing calls. And then the other half is in the field, primarily in the house. And there's like a reporter in there interviewing the family. It's 2 girls and a mom. And the whole program is, as the night progresses, we learn more and more about the situation. So that sounds good. We're about to spoil it. So again, I'd highly recommend you go watch the movie. With that being said, do you want to start us off, Bob?
I mean, look, okay. I don't really know where you want to start, but this is something I want to talk about. This movie is very interesting and very 1992, I guess.
Oh, it feels so like almost 80s too.
Yeah, but in a very good way because it utilizes technology in such an interesting way in the fact that it cuts between the studio and the people live in the field, which basically kind of segments a movie into parts, which is really cool. I really like it. But also the fact that they're taking phone calls from people that are experiencing quote-unquote paranormal things or have ghost stories is super, super cool. And the use of that as a plot device in the story was not something I expected whatsoever. And it adds a lot of, not reality, well, I guess it is kind of realism to the fact that you said this like came out and people thought it was real. It was like a big hoax thing. But the fact that they're doing like this sort of live show thing adds a lot of really cool stuff to the film.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all a part of the fact that this was intended to be filmed like it was a live broadcast.
Yeah.
So the whole thing's set up reminiscent of other live broadcasts the BBC did. That number that they give on air is 081-811-8181, and was a number that the BBC actually owned and used for live broadcasts.
That's so cool.
That was the real live broadcast number. And apparently people called in, and it was intended that when you called in, it would direct you to like a little pre-recorded message that would tell you, hey, this is fake, but do you have any like ghost stories to share? And of course, this was 1992, and they only had so many messaging machines. So when most people called in, they just got a tone, because the line was busy. So I think it ended up freaking more people out. But yeah, like all the segments are really cool. The one I do want to mention though is I'm pretty sure all the stuff at the house is pre-recorded. I don't think that was done live. But the thing I want to mention about it is it's all acted, like it's done live.
Mm-hmm.
They do the little stops, like, when you're switching to someone. If you ever
Yeah.
watch a live nude broadcast, they freeze and they don't make any noise before they start talking. The movie does that, but also you see people like fumble lines or get nervous
Yeah.
in a very, very realistic way.
They also do a really good job at because the people in the field and the people in the studio all have headpieces and can hear each other a lot of the time. Even though they can't see each other, they do a good job of reacting to each other's dialogue in a very convincing way, or like making things flow properly.
Yeah.
It's all very good.
Point being, I think it all feels fairly real.
Yeah.
The only things that I think feel a little bit less real is some of the acting during the high tense moments. I think falls a little short, but the moments are tense enough, I think, to carry you through that issue.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you were fairly scared, so I think it was effective. And I think the whole point I want to make here is that I wish I could have seen this live.
Oh, that would be crazy.
Back in 1992. Like,
Yeah, for
watching
sure.
it like 10 o'clock at night
Mm-hmm.
and hearing all this stuff. It apparently freaked out a bunch of people.
It would freak me out.
There is some pretty famous stories, and like, I don't know how substantial they are, but there's claims that one person, I believe, committed suicide in relation to this.
Oh my God.
But the big one is there's a couple cases where people reported PTSD associated with this program amongst children
Holy shit.
because it freaked them out so much. I was vaguely looking at that, and that one looked like it might have been like anxiety or something. It was unclear rather than PTSD. But yeah, it really freaked out a lot of people.
Yeah, it's just, and this is something I want to talk about. It is just convincing enough that it's real and that this thing is really happening in a lot of ways, because a lot of the segments feel
It's got that perfect amount of nothing happening.
exactly. It's just slow enough, and it's just I'm stuck on the word.
I think the best way to describe this program, and I don't think this is too much to spoil right now, is that as the night goes on, the activities in the home ramp up.
Yeah.
And so there is a slow transition from not only nothing happening in the show, but no new information being revealed
Mm-hmm.
in the broadcast studio. But as the night goes on, not only is more seen in the house, like activity-wise, but we learn more, I guess, pertinent information in the studio,
Yeah.
both from like interviews, but maybe some phone call stuff. And it's only in the last, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes that actual stuff happens
Maybe
that is
20.
like, oh, that's like actual ghost activity.
Yeah.
Before then, it's all smoke and mirrors, stuff
Yeah.
that could be easily mistaken as shadows. I think the best example is very early on in the movie. I say very early on in the movie, like almost immediately at opening, we see this clip of the girls being tormented in their bedroom by something. Stuff is flying, some lights go off, and that's kind of used as the intro clip to the haunting of this house.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that clip later on in the movie, probably like, I don't know, 20 minutes in, because someone's called in and been like, I saw a figure in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to see the footage again, and of course there's like a figure in the background. It's been imposed in the back half of the footage, and very cheekily they would put it in sometimes, but
Mhm.
not put it in other times to make you
Yeah.
question whether it's there or not. And it's used as this very early on sequence in the film to show like, maybe there's something there, maybe it's just a shadow. But it all ramps up from there. And I think ramping it up like that helps you buy into it.
Yeah.
Because if they just started with, oh, real ghost stuff,
It's just
you wouldn't have believed it. Because
No,
it's
it's
like,
not.
obviously, this is fake. But they get you to buy into the characters and feeling bad for everyone. And that's
Yeah.
what brings you into the horror.
No, I think that's probably what makes this film so scary for me, is like all of the realism stuff that we talked about, like making it feel like it could be a live show and has real elements tied into it. But the fact that the beginning of the film is very, this isn't real, it's a hoax. Or is it's that, is it real, is it fake thing that a lot of films tend to do in this type of like genre. But it's done so well at the beginning that by the time that you start to see stuff that is more substantiated, you're still going, oh, well, it could possibly not be real.
Yeah, and I mean, I think again that buys into the conceit of this, which was this was supposed to be an investigative program on the BBC. And
Mm-hmm.
so the beginning half of this, before it starts to get into the action, is set up to be investigative. It's looking at stuff and it's trying to be objective and questioning. And again, it's not till later on that we start to see different people's opinions.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, the paranormal investigator believes pretty heavily and is leaned towards that as her bias. But we learn that the main presenter, what's his name again? Michael Parkinson,
Yeah.
has a very strong bias the other way of everything that we're hearing
Yep.
is obviously a hoax.
And there's also multiple other people that they have like come into the broadcast that also don't believe this and believe it's a hoax. And it's all of this negative, like, doubting that this is real that makes the switch up at the end of the film where it's all pretty, I mean, it's definitely real, just so insane to me. Like,
Yeah.
it does not feel like that should be happening, and it makes it so much more terrifying because you're lulled into this sense of this can't be real. It's not real by everything else happening. And it's just crazy because I didn't expect it. That's the best part, is that you do not expect this flip at the end for it all to be real at all. And it's so
No, they get
utterly terrifying.
a good ways in, and I think they pretty much try and convince you that it's fake.
Yeah. There are so many good red herrings in this film about it being fake and not being real. And then to bring it all back around and make it real by the end is just incredibly satisfying and scary.
Yeah, but for me, I think the biggest buy-in, the thing that got me, I think the most invested, is the character portrayals.
Yeah.
I think this movie does a really, really good job of showing kind of like the trauma I think people face in situations like this.
Mm-hmm.
The paranormal researcher, and do you remember her character name? Dr. Lynn Pascoe.
There you go.
She, she's obviously believes, in this paranormal happening because she's been in the house. She was there for, I think, like 8 months.
Yeah, I think that's what she said.
But she takes this really interesting stance, and I actually really like it, as almost a message for this movie where she's like, I'm not going to tell you that this is real. Like, I can't force you to believe. But I think we should believe these people because obviously they've been traumatized. And I think throughout the whole movie, even though it borders sometimes on like, is it real, is it not? Oh, it's definitely fake. There's a very sympathetic angle of looking at these characters and going, does it really matter? Because they're very scared and
Yeah.
not having a good time. And I think that really gets you invested. I mean, especially the early sequences when nothing's happening, a lot of it's just looking at, oh, this mom who's having a hard time. Like, this whole family's having a hard time. I don't know if you picked up on it. There was definitely some type of nasty divorce going on.
Mhm. Yeah.
But they, like, were getting destroyed in tabloids because the mom wanted to move her kids out of the house because they were scared.
Yeah.
And the tabloids got a hold of that information and started, like, mocking her. And because she felt like no one would believe her, she went on the news to try and, like, get help before Ghostwatch, which is why the paranormal investigator found her. But, like, even for the kids, like, it's mentioned that, like, Susie, the oldest child, was, like, probably being bullied in school over this.
Yeah.
I don't know. I for me, I think that's the biggest buy-in. Which
No, it
gets
is
me
for
invested.
sure. It makes a lot of the stuff that we see later that's like so crazy and awful hit so much harder because we are invested in the characters and we care about them. And I just really enjoy how the doctor's portrayal of the people being affected by the ghost as victims adds points. It like makes it feel so much
More palpable.
palpable, yeah, that it could be real. And the fact that the presenter's like constantly trying to ask them questions like, but this could not be real.
He's so unsympathetic.
He doesn't give a fuck.
There's one moment, not to get too into it, but there's one moment where it kind of looks like it's all a hoax.
Yeah.
And Susie is just very clearly just out of it. She is not in a good headspace. And again, Parkinson, right?
Yeah.
Parkinson just starts asking her a bunch of like needling questions.
He goes full interviewer mode and just starts like hammering her.
and it's very clearly like uncomfortable
Yeah.
for everyone involved. The person who's the interviewer at the scene,
Mhm.
Sarah, who I think is the most kind to
Yeah.
everyone involved, you can tell is getting kind of irritated
Mm-hmm.
at Parkinson because, like, it's his viewpoint so removed from the situation.
Yeah. But I just think that also adds like a layer of like
Perspective.
but also like more layers of realism because like in a situation like that, that's his job. He's trying, like, it is an investigative thing at its source. So the fact that they have like proof that this could be a hoax and he wants to start peppering the people with questions to keep the pressure up makes sense and is cool.
Also, I'd point out Parkinson is by far the oldest and has probably been doing news broadcasting at that point for the longest.
Yeah.
And is probably used to being desensitized
Mm-hmm.
from, like, emotional moments that are happening.
Yeah. They do a really great job with characterizing everyone in a role that makes sense, but then doing cool, intricate stuff with those characters. Like those character archetypes, I guess, and making them feel individual. And making them feel individual adds more layers of realism, which amps up the fear in a lot of ways. It makes it really, really cool. I'm not over how scared I was, by the way. I'm still terrified of this film. It's very, very good. But
You're going to text me later and be like, I had nightmares.
yeah, I'm already worried about having to sleep tonight. I'm just like coming off of it now, talking about it for like the last like 20 minutes or whatever. I'm a lot of more stuff is coming into perspective and being made very cool
Yeah.
because it's a really interesting movie.
No, it's a very interesting concept, and I do think it's very well done.
That's the thing, is it's really well made too. So even though I'm like, man, I'm scared, that made me feel bad, it's super cool.
Like, we haven't mentioned it, but, you know, more paranormal stuff happens throughout the film.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that's a little bit harder to notice is, A, they'll insert things that are hard to notice that are, like, paranormal.
Yes.
But the best one is that the cameras and equipment will start to freak out, like, as we get farther and farther into the film, which is the classic, like, the paranormal messes with electronics.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it's, you know, very obvious that there's a couple, like, camera glitches and stuff
Yeah.
when nothing's happening, and it's like, why'd that happen? But also, there's references to stuff. Like, we learn really early on that clocks tend to stop working,
Yeah.
and we get a couple call-ins where people mention, like, their clock stopped.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was cool. Aside from that, though, I think the big thing I want to talk about here is kind of the ending and the haunting itself. But I think we should put that in a spoiler section. So is there anything else you want to mention before we move on to that?
Yeah, we haven't really talked about it a little bit, but there is a another guy who does like on the ground interviews outside of the house. I don't remember his name, by the way.
Craig Charles?
Yes,
The
that
really famous one? Yeah.
guy. Yeah, him, Craig Charles.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
he's a newscaster, but, like, he's also a comedian. That's what he does.
Yeah, I said it at one point. I was like, I hate this guy. I said it during the thing, not because I think he's bad or anything, but like the way he acts is so unserious compared to the rest of this movie.
Oh, yeah. Everyone else has, the presenters, I mean, have an air of professionalism.
Mhm.
Even Parkinson, who very clearly thinks this is all
Yeah,
baloney, is very professional about it. But then there's Charles, who is just, not only does he think it's all fake, he thinks it's a hoot.
yeah.
He's making fun of everything the entire time, cracking jokes.
But he does outside interviews with random townsfolk that like know things about the area and whatnot. And the inclusion of these, and this is something I want to talk about, is so cool
Yeah.
because it adds more depth to the entire situation as a whole and tells us about the toll this thing has taken on the community and not just the family itself, which makes the trauma that the people in the house but also outside of the house experiencing feel more real and gives layers and depth to everything that I think is so cool. Because a lot of the time when you have films like this, it's very focused on what's happening in the location, in the moment. It doesn't give us a overall worldview impact of what's happening around it. And the fact that this does, once again, adds more layers to the investigative aspect of the film. It makes it feel more professional, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, functionally, his interviews serve the same purpose as, like, the phone calls, where they're supposed to give us unrelated ghost stories that might give us more information. But for me, the big thing they do is they show kind of the outside of this house, and so they make the house feel like a real location.
Yeah.
Like, for most of his interviews, he'll, like, walk away from the house,
Mhm.
and it shows that, oh, this is a real place and not a backlot
It makes it feel grounded.
Yeah.
In a really good way. Like, that's my big takeaway from this film, is a lot of the film feels really grounded and real, and they do a great job at showing us that. So by the time you get to the scary stuff that is, definitely not real, it hits hard and it feels really scary and it's really cool.
All right. On that note, though, are you okay to go to spoiler section?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. This is Future Bob coming at you to let you know that if you do not want any major spoilers about this film, please skip to 1 hour, 1 minute, and 53 seconds. Once again, that's 1 hour, 1 minute, and 53 seconds for no major spoilers.
All right. So the reason I wanted to have a spoiler section here is because I really want to talk about the ending of this film.
The end of this film goes fucking crazy.
But before we go up to that, I think I want to cover kind of all the buildup of reveals for the poltergeist, which is very specifically named Pipes. And Pipes is set up to look like a bald dude in a black dress.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's technically supposed to be like a robe, but like a black...
No, it's a dress.
It's
explicitly
it is
a dress.
Explicitly a dress, but for people imagining it, robe dress, but in a black dress, and then he has very specifically like a bloody eye and a scratch on his face.
Mm-hmm.
And we see him subliminally a couple times throughout the film.
Yeah, and it's fucking scary.
I mean, we previously mentioned that the shadow
Mm-hmm.
in that first clip at the beginning. It's obviously not in the beginning of the film, but when they rewind it, when it's in there. I think that is very specifically Pipes has been super inserted into the scene. But aside from that, he is seen a couple different times, like in the corner of your eye.
Yep.
When was the first time you saw him?
The first time?
Yeah.
Well, we haven't talked. I don't know.
Was it when the cameraman is going into the room and he pans and you see him for half a second?
Which room?
Up into the bedroom.
No.
No?
I didn't see him then. No. I mean, you hear him a couple of times.
Oh, you hear him. But when was the first time you saw him?
Probably the glory hole.
Ah, yeah, so pretty late on in the film. I think that's like the third or fourth time you see him.
That's so scary because I didn't see him any of those other times.
We haven't even discussed the glory hole.
We haven't. And I'm pretty sure I want to name the episode The Glory Hole.
There is everyone will know it by this name, a Harry Potter bedroom space under the stairs.
Yeah.
It's a boot cupboard, like a supply closet under the staircase.
Well, it's bigger than that. It goes down and stuff.
I mean, it's implied it might go down into the basement, but it's unclear because we never go inside it. But that's where Pipes is like the haunting centered.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's been boarded up with a cricket bat. Go figure. But they do open it later on in the film, and we'll get into the why. But before they can like look inside with the camera, a glass mirror falls down onto, I think it was the
sound guy.
The sound guy's head and knocks him out and cuts him up. Obviously, this is way into like the hauntings completely out there.
Mm-hmm.
And we see the cameraman pan past the open door for half a second, and there's 100% a figure in there.
Yep.
But I'm surprised that that's the first time you saw him. There is, before that, half a second where they are investigating the room upstairs. I think that's right after the hoax situation comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And they're getting the girls to go downstairs to, like, leave the house. So, like, after the scratches happen on Susie's face, and the cameraman looks in the room, and you see him pan across the room, you see the figure, and then you see the camera guy pan back like he saw something.
I did. Oh, no, I remember that.
You remember that.
I think that's an outtake. Yeah, I remember that happening now. I forgot
That's
about
like the second time.
Holy
the first
fuck.
time, and I know for a fact you didn't catch it because you didn't react. There is a freak out moment very early on in the film where all the girls are upstairs, and they come downstairs, and there's a bunch of, like, drawings laid out on the floor.
Is he even the fucking glass?
And there's a cat in the, like, outside.
Yeah.
And if you look for half a second, there's a figure standing in between the camera guy and the mic guy in the reflection.
God, that's awful. That's so scary.
And so I
was
think
too focused on the cat.
and that's kind of the point I want to make here is that the reveal happens super slowly, and there's a bunch of like little things inserted that are easy to miss, which makes this film kind of nice on rewatch once you know what's going to happen. I think on that point, though, the whole thing with Pipes, as we come to learn, I think there's an implication that the land itself is haunted,
Yeah.
that so much bad stuff has happened in this one location that it's kind of built up.
Yeah, and that's something that we get implied through multiple interviews outside of the home.
Yeah, and that's actually how we learn all the background information, because
Yeah.
I think one of the
It's
cool
pretty
things
sick.
this program does is it shows the fact that, the paranormal researcher, she's obviously put a lot of time into documenting the events in the house itself. Like, she's interviewed the kids, she's tried to prove stuff wrong, because she wants this to be true, but she needs to prove it's true by trying to prove it's false. But she's done a bunch of research, but I think one of the fun things the film does is it shows that no matter how much research she does, she's like one person who's a part of a small team. And a lot of the phone calls are basically people giving her information that she didn't have access to beforehand.
Yeah, because it's stuff that wouldn't be on official records and only is known by locals or word of mouth, stuff like that.
Yeah, just stuff that like probably wouldn't have come up in her search.
Mm-hmm.
And so the two things we learn in relation to pipes, and again, this happens throughout the broadcast, is firstly, there was apparently a woman that lived on that street that used to be, I think, like a baby minder, so like a babysitter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's heavily implied that she might have lived in the house.
Or at least near the house.
Yeah. Back before that area was named, Fox Hill
Mm-hmm.
Drive. But she drowned children.
Yep.
In, they said, copper pots?
Yeah.
Which we see reflected later on in the film, because at one point, Kimmy, the youngest daughter, drowns her bunny rabbit, and she says
Yep.
Pipes told her to. And then rips out the bunny rabbit's eyes, too. Kind of the double horror there. But then the second thing we learn about Pipes is that back in the 60s, and this was off the records because it was illegal, but the family living there subletted the apartment,
Mm-hmm.
and the person who subletted it was not a good person.
Nope.
Child molester, which is important to note because throughout the film we hear the girls mention, he's touching me.
Yep. There's also, they hear stories about little girls going missing
Yeah.
around the area.
We'll get into that in a second. But the big thing here is that man hung himself
Mm-hmm.
in the glory hole.
Yep.
And he had cats. And so when he hung himself in the glory hole because the people who own the house weren't there, the cats ate him.
Yep.
And I mentioned this because, the first time I think we see Pipes, or at least the first time I noticed, there's a cat on screen.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only time we actually have a cat on screen. But then throughout the film, we hear a lot of cat noises, especially once everything's very out in the open.
Yeah.
Or scratching, which is very clearly like a cat scratching on stuff.
And also, the scratches that appear on Susie's face are cat scratches.
Yep. I'd also like to notice that the person who tells us about the man who died there, who killed himself in the apartment, was supposed to be his social services worker.
Yeah.
Who's calling because obviously he's been freaked out. That's probably very illegal what he did.
Yeah.
But he notes that the man was very disturbed, probably shouldn't have been allowed back in society, but he mentions very explicitly that he thought a woman was living inside of him and making him do things. And I think that's supposed to imply that, the reason that I think he killed himself with the black dress on, but the reason he did that was because the woman who had killed the babies by drowning them possessed him.
Yep. It's a very convoluted and insane premise, but it's really cool.
I think what's so cool about that is that's kind of how a lot of the more, I don't know, famous poltergeist stuff works, where it's like the buildup of multiple different legends on top of each other. I mean, go back to another film we watched. What was that? The Haunting? The black and white one with the woman who goes to the mansion.
Yeah.
But like the whole story behind that one is that there's like 12 people who have died there.
Oh, yeah.
And it kind of builds on the fact that like the hauntings related to all their deaths.
I mean, it's the classic ghost story thing of negative energy in a space creates ghosts.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what's going on here.
The other thing I want to tie in really quick before we get to the end, though, is, like Bob said, it's mentioned that people go missing in the area. And very explicitly, that is in the interviews with Craig Charles. He goes out. He actually walks like a block away to a park, and he interviews
locals,
but very explicitly these people who live like right across the street, and will sometimes take the family in when they get really freaked out. But they mention that, they found a dog in the park. a pregnant dog that had been slit open and then
With-
like animals thrown out, which
Yep.
is very stereotypically like what psychopathic behavior, right?
Mhm.
Not sociopathic.
Yeah.
I don't know which one it is, but
Also, it was a black dog.
it was a black dog, and I mean I think that's obviously the implication that there's
Evil afoot.
evil afoot, but maybe someone who's a little bit psychotic in the area, because they mentioned very explicitly it was gutted like with a knife.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that might be kind of in the line of it was a dog very explicitly and not a cat, which are
two different things.
antagonistic towards each other. But the fun thing, and I'm not even sure if this is anything, they mention explicitly that I think a girl and a boy died there. The girl was abducted, I believe, and then the boy was like stabbed to death.
I thought it was two girls.
Was it two girls?
I'm pretty sure it was two girls.
Oh, I'm just mentioning it because very shortly after that, we see two children walk up to Charles. And before we hear from them, it cuts.
Yeah.
But then later on in the film, the next time we see Charles, we see like another pair of children walk up to him.
Yeah.
And he's like, "You guys just keep following me." I thought that was always just an interesting implication,
yeah.
because that's the only time we see children in Halloween costumes the entire movie.
Yeah.
Even though there's a bunch of people outside, like no one's trick-or-treating here. It's like 10 o'clock, but it only happens after Charles learns that like children have been disappearing and dying. And I'm not sure if that's entirely an implication, but I think it might be, especially because that's once things start to happen.
Yeah. True.
And this is, I think, where we'll lead into the big end reveal here. But the big end reveal for this movie is not only the fact is that Pipes is real, right? And that this is a real haunting, which is kind of a cool reveal because they've somewhat convinced us that Susie and Kimmy have been pulling off this hoax.
Yeah.
Again, getting into the really sad part of, it's very clear the kids felt like they had to perform, both to get their mom's attention because of the messy divorce, but also because like they're on the news now.
Yeah.
And they want to prove to people they aren't lying. But once like Pipes comes out in the open, things start to get really real. But the big reveal for the whole movie is that the Ghostwatch broadcast was accidentally like a giant seance for essentially the totality of England. Like everyone watching at the time had unwittingly performed a seance. And so all the calls we've been getting throughout the movie, even the ones that sound really goofy, for instance, a guy was like, "I was sitting in my chair and my plate right next to me fell off and broke. So I was eating my cheese and pickle sandwich." All that ludicrous stuff is revealed to be, oh, these aren't like hoaxes because it's Halloween. No, we've accidentally spread like a poltergeist throughout England.
Yeah.
And so all this bad stuff is happening everywhere. And the big reveal has that happen, and then very clearly the poltergeist moves into the studio.
Yeah.
And there's this really shocking moment, and I'm not sure how quickly you figured it out. You definitely were like, something's not right here. There's this traumatic moment, like we said, the sound guy gets knocked out. Everyone's freaking out. Like pictures are falling off the walls, and the footage at the house cuts off, but they bring it back up, but everyone's just like sitting peacefully.
Yep.
And there's this reveal that 5-6 minutes later,
Yeah.
like a good period of time has passed, and it's revealed that, oh, we're watching like
old footage
we didn't see. And then obviously like lights and stuff start exploding in the broadcast studio, and eventually Parkinson gets possessed.
Yeah,
which ends
it's
on
really
like,
cool.
One of the most chilling lines where he's like, it's a repeat of something that I believe Susie said while possessed earlier in the film, but it's like, "You didn't believe me," and not his voice, and just a bunch of cat noises.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think that whole premise that it's like not just one location, but like has spread is so cool.
No, it makes all of the calls where people are saying, like, reporting ghost activity add more to the plot. They're not just like there for cheap scares or whatever, or like it adds more substance and less just atmosphere, which is super cool.
But it's also really cool because it makes it like a switch. Like you go the whole movie thinking it might be nothing, and then all of a sudden it recontextualizes everything.
That is the thing, is it's This movie is layers on layers on layers on layers of stuff, but then all those layers actually all come back around to make one thing rather than just being layers on something else.
Some might say it's an onion because onions have layers.
Okay, I didn't want to throw a Shrek joke in the episode, but alrighty.
It could be parfait. Everybody loves parfait. All jokes aside, though, not to bring it back to my previous point, but we can assume from the phone calls coming in, the haunting throughout England has been getting worse and worse.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to point out that very explicitly, this movie happens on Halloween, which is kind of traditionally the idea that that's when the veil between the dead and the living is the thinnest.
Yeah.
Which I think helps with the whole believability of like, oh, this program is kind of opening the way to the afterlife. But to bring it back to we start to see those kids in Halloween costumes very explicitly. That happens after we've started to hear like phone calls in about like haunting stuff.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really cool. If that's like the interpretation you want to take, it's like, oh, there's enough now happening throughout England, or at least in this area, that things are appearing away from TVs, or as the least away as you can, because they're still near like news equipment.
Yeah.
That being said, that's all I really have to talk about with the ending. I think it's really cool. It's
it's so cool.
Great switch up. It's probably the most haunting part of the movie, though.
Oh yeah.
Because Sarah, the newscaster on the scene, goes back in with the cameraman. They never leave because they're looking for Susie, who disappears.
Yep.
And it's implied that they get nabbed to who knows where.
Somewhere.
Sarah gets, pulled into the glory hole?
Yeah, she walks into the glory hole and the door slams shut.
Who knows what happens to the cameraman? Did it show the camera getting kind of knocked over? It kind of looked like it for a second.
Nope,
But I think that might have been
died.
just the cut. Yeah.
Yeah.
That being said, I think we'll go back to the regular program, do our ratings and stuff.
Okay. Hi, everybody.
Hey, if you left,
Welcome back.
welcome back. If you're still here, well, cool. Do you want to give it recommendations?
Yeah, if you liked when we covered, what was that, season 2, mockumentaries, like horror documentary, like sort of things, this is a very similar vibe.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're into that sort of movie, stuff like The Bay or maybe the Poughkeepsie tapes, it's a very similar like setup and vibe, I guess. It's different, but it's similar. So if you're into those sorts of films, I'd highly recommend it for that. If you like these sort of, not ghost files, but,
It reminds me a little bit of 60 Minutes.
sort of, yeah.
It's that same kind of setup.
Mm-hmm. That's
obviously
more what I
it's
was
about
getting at.
ghosts, but
It's super cool. If you want a slow film, this movie's an hour and a half, but it feels like fucking 10 years.
it feels so much longer. I don't actually know this, but I wonder if it had commercials,
That would be awesome.
like back during the original broadcast, because it was a broadcast. It was on TV.
No, I would love that.
And assumedly that meant it had commercials, so this would have been much longer.
Yeah. But my thing is, like, this movie is really well paced, but it is a slow build-up film. So if you're into that style of movie, I highly recommend it for that.
I do say it feels much longer than it is, but I feel like that helps the film feel like actually time's passing,
Mm-hmm.
which is nice.
If you're into a ghost movie, cool ghost film, it's very different than some of the other ghost films we've seen on the podcast. So I like it. I think those are my recommendations.
Okay, I think Bob really covered the big ones, but if you're into like horror mockumentary stuff, what was that word we found for the Italian stuff? Mondo. I don't think this is necessarily a Mondo film, but
No, this is not a Mondo film.
Similar implication.
It's not
But
exploitation.
if you liked that season 2 kind of horror mockumentary category, I think this is a very similar styled film.
Sorry, not to interrupt. What was the other film we watched that season for
Lake
that
Mungo.
category? Lake Mungo.
Which
I
I was
made
gonna-
that comparison during the movie. I didn't say it.
I was going to mention right now of like, out of all the films, if you liked Lake Mungo the best, because admittedly it was probably the best movie in that category,
Yeah,
that's probably what this feels closest to.
for sure. You're so right.
Both with the fact that it has ghosts, but some of that subliminal messaging and stuff like that, and the talking head interviews and stuff. Outside of that, if you are into maybe something that's geared towards news broadcasting, or like BBC personas.
It's cool.
It's really cool. Like Bob said, it is very reminiscent of some actual programming. For us in the States, I think 60 Minutes is probably the closest thing I could liken it to. Obviously not murder stuff, but haunted house stuff. But I know there was a bunch of programs around the same time that were doing similar stuff where it was like, we're going to go investigate supernatural stuff and maybe look at the science behind it.
A ton of them on like the Discovery Channel.
No, I meant like in England, there was a couple really big programs at the time.
Oh, really?
That were doing investigative stuff. That it was like, all right, let's look at how people pull off hoaxes and stuff like this.
That's sick.
But yeah, if you're into like any kind of news format stuff, I think this is a good recommendation, especially if you're British and haven't seen this.
Sure.
Aside from that, though, if you just kind of want a nice little ghost film, I think this is a nice one.
It's so cool, bro.
That being said, you want to rate it?
Yeah. 5. I'm coming out swinging with this one. This movie's fucking sick. This is one of those films where I've recovered fully from the trauma of witnessing it now at this point. I'm okay now, I think. It still scared me, but I'm recovering. No, this movie gets a 5 because I don't think we could watch another film with the same sort of concept of like live broadcast ghost investigation film that could be better. Like I don't think it.
I'm gonna be honest. I don't know how many other things have actually attempted that.
It is so well crafted around it being a live broadcast and using the like live broadcast elements in creative and cool ways to not only advance the plot but give us information that the characters otherwise wouldn't have access to. It's perfectly crafted around that concept while also maintaining this cool thing of like, is it real, is it not real, while also being scary. This film kind of blew me away for real. And it was really, really cool. I don't know what else to say. Like, I think I've talked enough about it, but I really like this movie, and it's very, very scary.
Fair enough. I'm in a weird place with rating this film because I think it's really, really good. But I also am fully aware that I don't necessarily get a lot of the parts that make this film as impressive as it is. Like, they went to really far lengths to make this work as a concept. Like, as a, the BBC didn't really want to confuse anyone, but they did want to make something that was scary and convincing. They did have a disclaimer at the beginning, but the tone is fairly serious.
Yeah, for sure.
But they go to some pretty extreme lengths, like getting actual reporters and stuff to do the reporter parts, like they play themselves. But obviously, like, I'm far enough removed, both from England, I'm not from the UK, but also from the time period that some of those cultural references that give this credibility don't hit for me. Like, I don't see those news reporters and go, oh, those are real people. I go, oh, those are just actors.
Sure.
I also am not existing in that time period of like, oh, the news is where I get all my information from. We live in a digital world. So, point being, I don't think the film is necessarily as effective as it originally was. At least for, like, us nowadays. I'm not saying it's not effective. Obviously, Bob was very, very scared by the film. But I think the fact that theoretically this could have been better is both disappointing but also really interesting. But the big thing I want to say is the BBC had some balls to do this.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I will say they kind of pulled back some. It was originally conceived as a 6-part show.
6-part?
Yeah, by the writer. But it was kind of, they thought it might have been a little too much because they would have built up like the haunting stuff out through the last through 6 episodes, and then the last 2 would have been probably like the last 20 minutes of this where it's really like clear. But I think producers like pulled it back and were like, what if we just make one like hour-and-a-half long program?
I think that works a lot better.
But it's just the last episode of like the 6-parter. And I think functionally that works a lot better. But even just doing one episode, I think that took a lot of gumption.
Yeah. And the production value on this is fucking crazy.
No, you can tell they really, really tried. Point being, I have a lot of respect for this film, and I think it's really, really cool. And I think for that alone, I'm just going to go ahead and give it a 5 as well. Because I think not only is this a fun watch and a cool movie, but I think the story behind it is just fascinating.
It's so cool. Can I be honest? If you weren't going to give it a 5, I was going to argue with you. This is a film where I was going to fight you. I was going to be like, no, listen here.
No, listen here, brother.
Yeah, I was going to listen here, you fucker. Not only because, like, I thought you weren't going to give it a 5 because you were talking about how, like, you don't have the cultural, like, it doesn't have the same cultural impact on you because of the time at which it was created. And, like,
I mean, it doesn't.
It doesn't. But I was going to argue that, like, but that doesn't make it a worse film.
No, I think that's a really interesting, but it's almost disappointing because I know this could technically.
Oh, yeah. Dude, I cannot, if I had seen this when it came out, I would lose my mind.
Yeah, it would have been so much more effective, and I think that's disappointing, but also very interesting.
It's definitely disappointing.
But yeah, it's hard for me to rate it any lower because, like, we talked about this on the Universal Monsters section, where, like, sometimes things are just really culturally or interesting or impactful.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is essentially the British broadcasting version of War of the Worlds, but television instead of radio.
And it's so cool.
It's just super cool. I will mention this now. There is a retrospective documentary on the making of this.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's called Ghostwatch Behind the Curtains, and it's based on the film's, like, lasting impact. It apparently came out in, like, 2013, but it was in production between 2007 and 2012. And it features, like, a bunch of interviews from original cast and crew. Yeah, if you're looking for it.
That's
cool.
dope. Okay. I think that's it.
All right. We're going to go to the outtakes. I don't necessarily think we're going to have anything. We
There might be
have
something in there.
one, but
There are a couple moments where I kind of lost my shit.
Bob got very quiet most of the film.
Yeah, I was scared.
That being said, we'll be back in a second.
Yeah, see you guys in a second. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the outtake section for this episode of Beware the Board. I hope you're enjoying our review of Ghostwatch so far. I like this movie, even though I found it extremely scary. I still really enjoyed myself. But without further ado, let's get into the outtake section. This first clip is Craig Charles scaring the piss out of me. God damn. That scared the shit out of me, bro. This next clip is my reaction to learning that there was a ghost in a scene the whole time. Ah! What the fuck, Ben? When did that get there? Was that there the whole time? Am I a madman?
The whole time.
This next clip is my reaction to the haunting really starting to escalate. No way. Don't open that, you crazy motherfuckers. I would never, Ben. You're fucking crazy
Bob,
people.
you wouldn't be in this house. Let alone not open the scary cat door.
It's called the glory hole, for fuck's sake. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the outtakes. Do we have any announcements, Ben?
Nope.
Okay.
Not doing an Easter film.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize.
There's just not a lot of Easter films. And also, I forgot to prepare anything. So
I will say, you did just tell me that a certain film is possibly an Easter movie.
I think Critters 2 might possibly be an Easter film.
But we haven't seen Critters.
We haven't seen Critters, and I've talked about how I don't really want to do sequels as holiday films. Because I think there's some implication that you need to see the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And then there might be a further implication that you need to watch our previous episode, and that's a lot.
Didn't I pitch a random called Small Things?
Yeah.
When are we going to... That's a good place to put Critters.
Well, yes, it is. And Gremlins.
Oh, Gremlins. Good movie.
You know, Critters came out first.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. But everyone's like, Critters is the Gremlins copycat.
I didn't know. Okay. Interesting.
Like, generally speaking nowadays. But it's like, no, Critters came out a little bit beforehand. Not by much.
That's cool.
Anyways, usual stick. Check us out wherever you get your podcasts. Spotify, Apple Podcasts. If you're viewing us anywhere, please give us, like, a good rating and maybe a brief, comment. That really helps us with, like, getting recommended to other people. You can also tell your friends about the podcast if you enjoy it.
For
and you
sure,
think
bro.
they will too.
Share the podcast.
That's always nice. It makes us feel good.
It's true. You know, I can actually. Sorry to interrupt. I can actually track shares. It
Oh.
tells me when people share the podcast, and I'm always like, "Oh, thanks, bro."
That's what gives Bob the motivation to do his short form content.
That on God.
Aside from that, though, we are also on YouTube, which, while not great for audio-only content, is really good for giving us some support because, you know, we can see likes and subscriptions and stuff like that. And that's a really easy way for us to view engagement since the analytics for Spotify and stuff is not always the easiest. With that being said, YouTube has a couple interesting tools that might be helpful to you. There's a bell button, which can notify you whenever we post a new video. So if we hit you with a surprise like holiday episode, that's an easy way to find out. But the other thing with YouTube is it has a search button on our channel, which lets you look up keywords. So if you're curious if we've covered a specific movie, that's an easy way to check. Aside from that, though, the big thing with YouTube is it's one of the two main places to communicate with us at. You can go and do that in the comment section of a specific video, or you can go over to Twitter at BewareTheBoard and maybe start meowing at Bob.
No, okay.
Send him some like cat emojis or something. I don't know.
No, I thought you were gonna say some other shit, and I was kind of scared. Considering something that happened in this film, I don't want any of that happening to me. Please, no.
I don't know what you're implying right now, but I'm concerned.
Well, it's in the spoiler section,
Oh, okay.
so I don't want to talk about it outside of there because we didn't spoil it. Anyway, like Ben said, check us out on Twitter at BewareTheBoard. It's where we post updates about the show, information about the show. Basically, if there's anything you don't know about the show, it goes on our Twitter. On Mondays, I post a spoiler post for that Friday's episode, which is a hidden movie cover that you can reveal. So you can watch the movie before we do. So we release episodes, you don't get any spoilers. We're being vague about stuff. You know what we're talking about. Then, on Fridays, or whatever day an episode goes live, I always post a link to the episode. So if you're missing an upload or someone up, there's always a link on our Twitter. Last thing, Ben mentioned it earlier. We do short form content for the show over on at BewareTheBoard on TikTok and on YouTube Shorts. Big live games. I just had a fucking.
What was that?
Sorry, I'm just stroking out. Just give me a second. Let me reboot. There we go. We've been getting a lot of engagement over there recently, and I really appreciate the support. So if you like the show and want to support us, check us out there at BewareTheBoard on TikTok and on YouTube Shorts. Ben, I think that's it.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys next time.
We'll see you guys next time.